Hello fellow cyborgs, and welcome to an Unhaul Haul video because a lot of book things have been happening recently, and I figured that having it in a separate video would probably be for the best. So prior to all of the books that you're going to see me haul, I was feeling a little bit worried about the physical TBR number that I have and how it hasn't really moved from like the mid to top 30s in the entire year. And I was looking at my shelves and saw 4 books that I was kind of thinking, when am I ever going to actually read these? I keep them to theoretically read them someday, but have never had any concrete plans to do so. So let's try the first chapter of each and see which ones are going to stick around and which ones are just going to go away. I ended up unhauling 2 and keeping 2, so let me show you the 2 that have survived that unhaul process. No Great Mischief by Alistair MacLeod. He is a Canadian author, and I have previously read a short story collection by him, and this is a novel, and I believe it's autobiographical, if not like nonfiction, then it is certainly a very heavily autobiographical influenced novel. The first chapter was about him reconnecting with his brother, who is an alcoholic and really suffering from alcoholism, and I wasn't like super impressed, but the chapter was really short and the text is like super huge, so it was a really quick first chapter, and I decided to read chapter 2, and that one was really interesting. Actually, we got to hear more about an ancestor from Scotland who was prevalent in their family's identity, and I remembered why I really enjoyed his short stories and why I picked this up in the first place. I also think that when I only have committed to reading 1 chapter and I choose to read a second chapter for whatever reason, that's a good sign. So this one is definitely sticking around, and I think I might try to read this in the fall because it starts, I think, in September if I remember correctly. So I'm actually going to still potentially read this at some point. The other keeper was one I really thought I was going to unhaul, and that is The Heart of Midlothian by Sir Walter Scott. I picked this up when I was in Scotland. It was a souvenir from the Writers' Museum there in Edinburgh, and since have like never really intended to read it, but I wanted to have a book from one of the writers that I purchased at the museum. So I started reading this thinking that I'm probably not going to get very far in it, but I was actually really pleasantly surprised by Sir Walter Scott's writing style. It reminded me a little bit of Anthony Trollope. There was a lot of wit and humor to it that I really wasn't expecting, and it was not as dry as I had feared it would be since this is a pretty early novel. I know that the Bronte siblings read Sir Walter Scott. I believe this was written in like 1818, which, you know, I mean, same sort of time as Jane Austen, but I mean, Jane Austen's just a whole different sort of person. So anywho, I am hoping to read this year. I don't know. I have other classics on my TBR that I'm more interested in, but I definitely am not scared about this writing style as much as I was before. Do you like how I still don't have like concrete plans as to when I'm actually getting to those? One of the books that did not survive the unhaul, however, was Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. This is a very famous play, and I wanted to read it because it's one of the most famous plays, and a few years ago when I decided I was going to read plays, I decided I should read like the classic plays that everybody knows about. This one has to deal with Hamlet, but from the tangential characters of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern's perspective. However, when I read the back of the play, it said it was very reminiscent of Waiting for Godot, which was another one of those plays that I decided I needed to read for my like play knowledge, and I really disliked it, and it was not my jam at all. I read the first, I don't know, 10 or 15 pages, and there was like no mention of Hamlet, no mention of Denmark. It was very just like out there and weird, and I just don't have the patience, so I got rid of that one. I also unhauled Mermaid Song by Alida Van Gors. This was like the mermaid fantasy novella, or novel rather, of my dreams, that when I realized that it was a thing and my local bookstore when I was living in Canada had it, it was amazing. I was going to read it. This was going to be a mermaid book, not where the mermaid is a human for most of it, but where the mermaid is a mermaid the whole time. But then I read the prologue and part of the first chapter, and it was just not good. So the prologue starts with our main character, Elan, when she's like 11, and it appears as though she's in an abusive family environment where she has a father or like a stepfather who goes into rages. She has to go try to find him because he's accidentally taken a broken fishing net to go hunting. And even though he'll be really pissed at her for finding him while he's hunting, she knows he'll be even more pissed if he fishes with a broken net. So she's running around the Mer Kingdom or whatever, trying to find him, can't find him, is in franticness, and then ends up going past this barrier that she's not not supposed to go past, and meets this like evil merman hunter guy who has like 13 pet sharks just for fun. And he like grabs her by the throat, kind of gropes her chest, and then bites her on the shoulder so that he can recognize her in the future when he actually will want to kill her. And it was just really rapey and creepy. And I don't think that the book was like judging him to be like that, because they described how like nice his physique was, and it just felt very like rapey 80s to me. And then unfortunately chapter 1 kind of further develops this ickiness feeling in that the mermaids, which are called Mera in this world, are like second class citizens to the Grismog, who is this other kind of mer person, but they're like frog mer people or something. It wasn't fully developed. Elan is just like crapped all over by Grismog maidens when she's trying to do her job, and they're like stealing her harvest and threatening her with the law because apparently Meras can't sing. And I was just like, this is mermaid dystopia with rapey hunter dudes. I'm not not here for it. I'm not doing it. No, thank you. So that one was Unhauled, and it's unfortunate because I had my hopes on that one, but I'm glad I tried it because, oh no. Then I decided to buy some books from Powell's. I have good reasons, maybe, you let me know. I picked up these 2 Shakespeare works. So first is the sonnets, and then we also have King Lear. I picked up King Lear because I have read it a couple times before for classes in high school, and I really enjoyed it, and we are going to be reading it for the Bard Book Club, hosted by Libby Stevenson in September. So I decided to buy an actual copy and not just get it from the library. And then the sonnets, you may recall, I picked up a copy of the sonnets early this year because Libby Stevenson made me do it, and I attempted to read it, and then I was having a really hard time. Libby kindly recommended that I listen to the LibriVox recording of the sonnets and read along, and hopefully that would aid in my comprehension. And when I attempted to do that, I realized that my edition of the sonnets that I had reordered them for some reason. I, at the time, thought like, oh, okay, so they're reordered. I guess the scholars know what they're doing. But then I realized that this is like one of the only editions that does that, and that it was like completely ridiculous. So I unhauled that copy and decided to get this copy. I really like these Macmillan Collector's Library editions. I really like the new colors. So I decided to get Shakespeare in these 2 editions since I have Hamlet in this edition as well. So fortunately, they're fairly short, and the sonnets I'm already working my way through, and King Lear is a reread, so it doesn't count on my physical TBR, even though I will be reading them instead of things off my physical TBR later. I also picked up Frankenstein. This is the Rhodes Classics edition. This is, of course, by Mary Shelley. I read Frankenstein a few years ago and was not super fussed about it, but recently Bonnets at Dawn was talking about Mary Shelley and Mary Wollstonecraft, and it really made me think that I would want to reread Frankenstein. And since they had this beautiful edition and they had it at Powell's, I decided to go ahead and just get myself this copy and add it to my Rhodes Classics collection. Hopefully, now that I know it better to expect from Frankenstein, I will enjoy it a little bit more when I reread it. I also picked up this horror novella Husk by Rachel Autumn Deering. This is a highly recommended pick from the Books in the Freezer podcast, and I've had my eye on it for a while and realized that Powell's did have a copy in this little novella in paperback as opposed to me having to buy it from Amazon on the Kindle. This is about, all I know is that it has something to do with a soldier who's come back from the war with PTSD, and then I'm assuming horrifying things happen. And that's kind of all that I remember, but I remember hearing it was really good, and the fact that it's so short, it makes me really happy too. So hoping to read this for Thriller-a-thon, which is hosted by Harriet Rosie in August. So this small little thing will be pretty good for a readathon since I haven't been like reading a ton this year. It doesn't feel like that anyway. My generous friend Acacia sent me 6 books for my birthday, so let me go through those with you. She had an extra copy of Sandy Jeff's The Mad Poets Tea Party. This is a poetry collection about medication, schizophrenia, mental health, and Alice in Wonderland. She loved this, and I am currently picking my way through and liking it a little bit. So we will continue with this one, and I will report back soon. She also passed along Let Me Tell You by Shirley Jackson. This is a collection of short stories, essays, funny stories, non-fiction commentary. Let me give you actual things. It also has essays on like the craft of writing, humor stuff. So a real mixed bag of Shirley Jackson. I've heard that this isn't like the best collection of Shirley Jackson's work, because I think maybe it's so broad, and this is collecting like previously uncollected stories, which means that maybe they weren't quite so revolutionary. But I've really enjoyed all of the Jackson that I've read so far and would love to pick through this, and I'm planning to read some of it for the Thriller-a-thon as well. She also included this copy of The Trauma Cleaner, One Woman's Extraordinary Life in the Business of Death, Decay, and Disaster by Sarah Krasnostein? This is a memoir of a trans woman who also happens to work as a crime scene cleanup, I believe, and it also talks about her life and all of the things that she's been through. I've heard that this is kind of harrowing, but also really awesome. I am planning on reading the audiobook for Thriller-a-thon of this and hoping to love it as much as I've heard other people do so. I also have 2 of Becky Chambers' works. We have A Closed and Common Orbit and A Record of a Space-Born Few, and apparently this is a signed edition. Acacia bought these for me from England back when A Record of the Spaceborne Few was released, because she was making an order for herself, and it's better to buy more to save on shipping when you're ordering from England. And then she's just been taking good care of them ever since last summer, and they finally are here with me. I'm really, really excited to continue the Wayfarer series. I absolutely loved A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, and I'm hoping to find some cozy space adventures with interesting characters that will just fill my heart with the warm fuzzies. She also sent me a copy of Helen Oyeyemi's latest work, Gingerbread. This seems to be fairy tale-esque, but then also a whole lot of magical realism, as only Oyeyemi will do. I know very little more, but I'm excited to try another Oyeyemi. I read Mr. Fox quite a number of years ago and really enjoyed it at the time, but then later found it unmemorable, so I'm interested to see what I think of this one. So those are all the books that have been in and out of my life recently. This puts my physical TBR up to 40 books, and I'm fine with that. I have a lot that I'm hoping to get through for Thriller-a-thon, and let's see how I do toward getting my physical TBR down by the end of the year. Fingers crossed that will work out. Please let me know in the comments down below if you have opinions on any of these books that I've picked up, any that you think I definitely need to get to sooner or later, or any that weren't quite your favorite. I hope that you have received a new book that you love in your life, and until next time, continue to be lovely.